We already spent the money, Sabrina. Now you need to help us hide it. My mother slammed a document titled Retroactive Gift Affidavit in front of me. She wasn't asking for permission to take my father's $125,000 life insurance policy. She was demanding I help her cover up the fact that she had already stolen it. Jennifer's father ordered a forensic audit, she said, her voice tight with panic. If you don't say that money was a gift, Warren looks like a fraud, and the wedding is off. Do this. And maybe your brother can finally marry into money and pull you out of the gutter. I looked at Warren, sweating in his designer suit. I didn't scream. I simply picked up the pen and signed. They thought I was saving them. They didn't know I was just authenticating the evidence for their prison sentences. Have you ever been asked to cover up a lie to save a family member's reputation? Tell me your story in the comments. My name is Sabrina, and I am 32 years old. In my day job as a supply chain executive for a global food conglomerate, I manage crises that cross oceans. I move perishable goods through war zones and hurricanes. I am used to high pressure, tight margins, and people lying to me about delivery times. But 2 years ago, when my father died, I wasn't an executive. I was just a grieving daughter, exhausted and desperate to keep my family afloat. That was the year I learned that grief is the perfect cover for embezzlement. While my brother Warren was too emotional to handle the details, I took a leave of absence to manage everything. I spent my days arguing with hospice nurses and my nights staring at spreadsheets, trying to reconcile my father's end-of-life care with his dwindling bank account. I was sleeping 4 hours a night, running on caffeine and duty. It was during one of those sleepless nights, a week after the funeral, that my mother came to me. She was weeping, holding a stack of red-stamped envelopes. We're drowning, Sabrina, she sobbed. Your father hid debts, medical bills. If we don't consolidate everything right now, the creditors will take the house. They'll take everything. She put a power of attorney document in front of me. She said she needed the authority to negotiate with the hospitals, to protect the family estate. I looked at her tear-stained face, the face of the woman who raised me, and I didn't see a predator. I saw a widow who needed help. So I signed. I gave her full control over the insurance payout and the estate, believing I was being the responsible one. I was an idiot. There were no medical debts. My father had excellent insurance. That panic, those tears, it was a performance. Andrea took that $125,000. Money my father explicitly intended for me to start my own business. And she didn't pay bills. She laundered it. She funneled the cash through an old family trust account to hide it from immediate tax scrutiny, masking the transfers as maintenance costs. Then, she used every cent as a down payment on a luxury penthouse condo downtown. But she didn't put it in her name. She put the deed in Warren's name. Why? Because Warren needed a stage. He couldn't just be an unemployed 28-year-old who played video games. He needed to be Warren, the visionary crypto investor. He needed an address that screamed success so he could court women like Jennifer, a private equity heiress whose family owned half the state. While I went back to work, driving a 10-year-old sedan with a rattling muffler, and living in a studio apartment to pay off my own student loans, Warren was hosting rooftop parties in a home bought with my inheritance. I remember visiting once, bringing them groceries because Andrea said they were tight this month. I walked in to find Warren popping a bottle of vintage champagne, laughing with his friends about how easy it was to make money if you just had the right mindset. I stood there, holding a bag of generic pasta and tomato sauce, watching my brother live the life my father's death had paid for. They laughed at my old car. They called me thrifty and risk-averse. They didn't know that while they were playing house, I was beginning to wonder why the numbers didn't add up. They thought they had buried the truth along with my father. They forgot that everything leaves a paper trail. Things didn't stop with the stolen inheritance. That was just the down payment. The real cost of maintaining a lie is the upkeep. And my mother, Andrea, had no idea how to budget for the lifestyle she was trying to fake. 6 months after they moved into the penthouse, the calls started. They were never straightforward requests. They were always emergencies wrapped in guilt. The condo association fees went up. Sabrina, Andrea would say, her voice tight on the phone. If we don't pay by Friday, they'll put a lien on the unit. You know Jennifer is coming over for dinner next week. Imagine if there's a notice on the door. It would ruin everything we've built for your brother. We didn't build anything. I was building a career. They were building a house of cards. But I paid. I paid the $2,000 monthly maintenance fees. I paid the quarterly country club dues so Warren could pretend to play golf with Jennifer's father. I paid the lease on Warren's brand new Porsche because Andrea insisted that a crypto visionary can't drive a Toyota. I was driving a 10-year-old sedan with a check engine light that I couldn't afford to fix because my paycheck was subsidizing their delusions. I ate ramen in my cubicle while they ate oysters at the marina. I told myself I was being the good daughter. I told myself I was keeping the peace. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. I was sitting in the break room at work, scrolling through social media, when a post from my sister Beatrice popped up. It was a photo of her lounging on the white leather sectional in the penthouse living room furniture I had paid for. She was holding a glass of rosé, the city skyline glittering behind her. The caption read, "Manifesting abundance pays off. So proud of the life I've built. Hashtag self-made." I stared at the screen. Self-made. She hadn't made a dime. She hadn't contributed a single cent to the mortgage, the lights, or the wine in her hand. She was 24, unemployed, and living inside a lie I was financing. Something inside me snapped. But it wasn't a hot, screaming snap. It was cold. It was the sound of a lock clicking shut. I realized then that I wasn't their family member. I was their venture capitalist. And this was a failing investment. They thought my silence over the last year was submission. They thought I was the quiet, mousy sister who would just keep writing checks because I was desperate for their approval. They didn't understand the industry I work in. In high-stakes logistics, you don't scream when you see a competitor over-leveraging themselves. You wait. You let them extend their credit lines until they are drowning, and then you acquire them for pennies on the dollar. I looked at that photo, and for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt powerful. Andrea was house-rich and cash-poor. She had burned through the stolen insurance money and was now entirely dependent on my loans to keep the lights on. She was insolvent. I put my phone down and finished my coffee. I didn't leave a nasty comment. I didn't call Andrea to scream about the unfairness. I went back to my desk, opened a fresh spreadsheet, and started typing. I wasn't going to argue with them anymore. I was going to audit them. I stopped answering their calls. I didn't block them yet. I needed to see their desperation in real time, but I let every ring go to voicemail. I stopped showing up for Sunday dinners. I stopped responding to the group chat about the vision for the engagement party. To them, I was sulking. To me, I was entering the quiet period before a hostile takeover. I used the access I still had, remnants of the time I managed the estate, to run a forensic audit on my mother's finances. It was worse than I thought. Andrea was insolvent. She had burned through the stolen insurance money on the down payment and renovations. Now, she was floating checks to pay the caterers for the engagement party. She was terrified. If that check to the venue bounced, the wedding was off, and her chance to marry Warren into the billionaire class would evaporate. She needed liquidity, and she needed it fast. I didn't wait for her to ask me for another loan. I beat her to the punch. I incorporated a shell company in Delaware called Nemesis Holdings LLC. It cost me a few $100s and provided total anonymity. On paper, it was a faceless investment firm specializing in distressed assets. In reality, it was just me and a laptop. I reached out to a commercial mortgage broker I knew from my supply chain work, a man named Marcus, who didn't ask questions as long as the commission was good. I gave him a very specific set of instructions. "Contact Andrea," I told him. "Tell her you represent a private equity firm looking for high-yield short-term loans. Offer her $200,000. Hard money. Fast cash. No credit check." Marcus made the call on a Tuesday morning. I listened to the recording later. You could hear the relief in Andrea's voice when he mentioned the number. She didn't ask why a private equity firm was interested in a residential condo. She just heard 200,000 and saw a lifeline. But I wasn't handing her free money. I was handing her a contract laced with poison. The loan terms were aggressive. High interest, short term. But the kill switch was in the fine print. A confession of judgment clause. It meant that if she defaulted or if she lied on the application, Nemesis Holdings could bypass the courts and seize the collateral immediately. The collateral, of course, was the penthouse. Andrea hesitated when she saw the paperwork. Even she knew that risking the condo was dangerous. "I need a day to look this over," she told Marcus. "I need to ask Warren." That was the moment to spring the trap. I texted Marcus the cue. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice smooth and professional. "Nemesis has another borrower ready to take this capital within the hour. This is a VIP fast-track deal. If you want the wire transfer to clear before your dinner with Jennifer tonight, I need the signature now." The false urgency worked perfectly. Andrea panicked. She couldn't face Jennifer at dinner with a declined credit card. She didn't call Warren. She didn't read the clause. She grabbed the pen. The digital packet arrived in my inbox 20 minutes later. I opened the PDF, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the thrill of the hunt. There it was. On page 4, the loan application asked for the source of the property's equity. Andrea had checked the box for personal savings and inheritance, legally certifying that the down payment money was hers, not stolen. That was bank fraud. On page 9, there was the guarantor line for Warren, the legal owner of the condo. The signature read Warren, but the handwriting was loopy, frantic, and unmistakably Andrea's. That was forgery. I printed the document and held it in my hands. It was heavy. It wasn't just a loan application anymore. It was a signed confession to federal crimes, notarized and time-stamped. She thought she had secured the funds to impress the billionaire's daughter. She didn't realize she had just handed the deed to her house and her freedom to the daughter she betrayed. The closing was scheduled at Sterling & Associates, a title company that occupied the 45th floor of the city's most pretentious glass needle. The conference rooms had mahogany tables long enough to land a plane on and views that cost more per hour than I used to make in a week. It was the perfect stage for a tragedy disguised as a triumph. I arrived 20 minutes early. I wasn't wearing my usual field gear, jeans, and a safety vest. I was wearing my acquisition armor. A tailored black blazer, stilettos that clicked like gunshots on the marble floor, and a watch that cost more than Warren's car lease. I sat in the lobby, crossed my legs, and waited. At 1:55 p.m., the elevator doors slid open. They walked out like royalty visiting the colonies. Warren was wearing a bespoke navy suit that I knew he'd charged to the emergency credit card. Beatrice was trailing behind him, clutching a designer bag and chattering nervously. And leading the phalanx was Andrea, draped in a cream-colored coat, looking every inch the matriarch of an empire she didn't actually own. But the most important person in the group was the woman walking beside them, Jennifer. She didn't look like a blushing bride-to-be. She looked like a private equity shark circling a wounded seal. She was dressed in sharp business attire, holding a leather portfolio, her eyes scanning the room with cold precision. Andrea had invited her to witness the family's business acumen, thinking this deal with Nemesis Holdings would prove Warren was a serious player. She didn't realize Jennifer wasn't there to applaud. She was there for due diligence. She had been asking questions about Warren's crypto millions for weeks, and today, she wanted to see the ink on the paper. Andrea noticed me first. Her step faltered, shock flashing across her face before fury took over. She stormed toward me, heels biting into the carpet. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "If you're here to beg or embarrass me in front of Jennifer, I'll have security drag you out." I didn't rise. "I'm not here to beg, Mother." "Then leave. This is a closed meeting for investors. Go back to your warehouse." Warren and Jennifer approached. Beatrice forced a smile, calling me harmless. Jennifer didn't look at her. She studied my watch, my shoes, my posture. "Sabrina," she said coolly. "Are you involved in this transaction?" Andrea laughed too fast. "Of course not. She works in logistics." Gripping Warren's arm, she marched toward the conference room doors, dismissing me as she always had. I waited until they shut. Then I stood, smoothed my blazer, lifted my briefcase. "Actually," I said to the empty lobby, "I'm here for the closing." Inside, Andrea pitched the deal, while Warren sweated. Jennifer scanned the papers, unimpressed. "You said the property was owned outright. Why is there a high-interest lien?" Warren stammered. "Sorry I'm late," I said. Andrea spun around. "Security." Mr. Henderson blinked at his file. "Miss Andrea. This is Miss Sabrina, Managing Director of Nemesis Holdings." The lender. Silence crushed the room. I took the seat across from my mother. "Wealth isn't what you wear," I said calmly. "It's what you control." Andrea whispered. "You're Nemesis, and you falsified your application." I slid documents to Jennifer, proof the down payment came from stolen insurance money, and that Andrea had forged Warren's signature. "This isn't family business," I continued. "It's federal fraud." I nodded toward the lobby. "Police are waiting." Andrea went gray. "I have options," I said, placing the deed down. "Jail tonight? Or you transfer the condo to me and walk free." Jennifer stared at Warren. "You stole from your sister to buy my ring?" She ripped it off and dropped it on the table. "I don't marry fraud." Andrea signed. 3 months later, I sold the condo, secured my future, and blocked them all. They say I ruined their lives. I say I reclaimed mine.